Over the last year or so, I've started making ecology and world documentaries on Monster Hunter, a game franchise that is very near and dear to me. It's been a ton of fun, and the community has generally been extremely pleasant, which I am immensely grateful for. However, as I keep doing these and more people find them, a reasonable question arises. How much of what is said in these videos is actually accurate to the game's canon? It's a fair concern. Monster Hunter lore is famously nebulous and fraught with misinformation after years of being fairly hard to access, and these videos literally start with a disclaimer saying, some of this might be made up. So how far can you trust the information given here? So, for the sake of transparency, I thought I'd explain my process, my intentions with these videos, as well as some examples of inaccuracies, embellishments, and honest-to-God mistakes on my part. First, let's establish a baseline of knowledge of how lore even works in Monster Hunter, just so we're all on the same page here. You have to understand two things. 1. Most of the lore is extremely hard to access nowadays, and from my perspective as a Western fan. Earlier games in the series were ironically pretty happy to explain and describe the world and setting openly if you had the patience to read the text boxes. But more recent games like Rise and World have gotten increasingly more tight-lipped when it comes to any information that isn't immediately crucial to that game's specific story and vibe. So this means that as far as direct lore goes, information that is actually inside of the games, it is mostly locked behind walls and walls of flavor text in massive, decade-old video games that may not even have been translated correctly in some areas. The original massive text archive that compiled all the game text from all of the games, MHText, has also recently gone down, so that source is just completely gone. As for external lore, that is to say lore that comes from things outside of the games, we have art books, development books, guidebooks, etc. And they are in an even worse situation in terms of accessibility, because many of them have never even been released outside of Japan. The illustration series of art books, as well as the Monster Hunter World Complete works, are the only items that have, thus far, seen an English release. This means that the vast majority of supplemental material remains entirely exclusive to Japan and the Japanese language. This is especially devastating in the case of the Hunter's encyclopedias, which are some of the most overt and direct compilations of Monhan lore out there. If you want to check them out, you're gonna have to find them as they are pretty rare these days, and import them, and then translate them yourself. That's if that book is even still in circulation. Some texts have entirely been lost due to not being printed anymore, and there seems to be no digital copies around for some of them. Thus, the lore of Monster Hunter is generally tough to pin down, as many aspects of it are inaccessible, especially to the West and to people of today. The second, and maybe larger issue when it comes to accuracy, is that Monster Hunter lore is predominantly written from an in-universe perspective. In the games, information about the world, the people, the monsters is generally given to us by characters in the game fiction. This continues onwards in the books. The encyclopedias, for example, essentially pretend to be books that exist inside of the Monster Hunter universe, written by the scholars of Shrade. This is a really cool and cute idea, but it introduces a problem. These people are unreliable. Living in this world means they don't have the bird's eye view of the universe and lore that, say, a developer would have. And so, to keep this idea intact, the books as well as the game text include speculation, uncertainty, and incomplete information. While this adds to the realism and immersion, it makes getting a definitive statement on certain topics somewhat difficult. There's always some gap, some piece of speculation, or some level of uncertainty to everything that these people say. You will occasionally hear the complaint that Monster Hunter has no lore, which is completely wrong. Monster Hunter has buckets and buckets of lore. It is one of the richest gaming universes I can think of, but a lot of it is so immersive and so steeped in this rule of trying to pretend to be an in-universe account that it is hard to pin down definitive statements on a lot of things. It is immersive and it is fun to read, but it is pretty tough on you if you're trying to make a sort of wiki entry on any given thing. Combined, these two aspects mean that we have a hard-to-access, predominantly Japanese text that even when translated correctly, may not be 100% conclusive. Add to this the fact that the text in question has been written and rewritten many times over the last 20 years through retcons, new games, and new translations, and it becomes extremely hard to create a holistic, consistent overview of Monster Hunter lore as a whole. Which is where my videos come in, for many people. My goal with my Nature of Monster Hunter series, as well as all the adjacent doku-style videos, was to create immersive, semi-narrative content that would instill into the viewer a sense of fascination and wonder towards the world of Monster Hunter. At the time I came up with the idea, Monster Hunter lore content on YouTube was fairly sparse and inconsistent, but more importantly, the kind of content I wanted to watch, where someone treats this universe as real and immersive, didn't really exist, or at least I couldn't find it. All that I could find at the time were videos that talked about these games as games. So, I, in typical YouTuber fashion, decided to make the kind of content that I would like to watch. The immersion and the documentary style was going to be what was going to set my videos apart, and for the sake of committing to that immersion, I set a few ground rules. Basic stuff, like how I will never acknowledge or mention that these monsters aren't real outside of the disclaimer, or how I will avoid showing HUD elements at all costs. More importantly in regards to canonicity, however, I wanted to allow myself some wiggle room to flesh ideas from the game out beyond the specifically canon aspects. If the lore gives me a tantalizing idea that it leaves unfinished, I wanted to be able to elaborate on it, both because it would make the videos meatier and because it would get the creative spark going both for me and my audience and hopefully get people more interested in Monster Hunter as a series. It would also allow me to fill some gaps that the explicit lore leaves unattended. This practice only makes up a fraction of the information provided on this channel, mind you, but it still exists. Here too, I set some rules for myself. I will never just outright invent something. I can take a marginal aspect from the books and games and then expand on it, flesh it out, but I can never actually just make up entirely new information and new aspects of the world. For example, through dialogue in both Monster Hunter Tri and Iceborne, we know that there is a group of hooded men that insists on suppressing information on powerful monsters like a Latreon. That is a canonical fact. So when it came time to mention them, I gave them a design and a generic name, both of which are not strictly canon, simply a possible interpretation of the little information the canon gives us. But I, for example, could not have made up that group for myself, because that would be creating a new world aspect to the universe. My second rule is that none of these extrapolations can ever contradict known information. While I allow myself to stretch my creative legs, I try my hardest to never conflict with things that are 100% confirmed. So, for example, no matter how much I dislike it, how little sense it makes, and how much I wish I could change it, Black Diablos is classified as a subspecies, no buts or ifs. So when talking about it, I have to work within that limitation. Maybe it was classified as a subspecies in the guild's early days, and now there's debate over its legitimacy in the scholarly halls of the guild. Ideas like that are usually how I resolve these situations, allow myself a certain level of speculation through the aspect that the guild is in of itself not a completely perfect unity or group. So even when I add my own flavor to things, or when I try to add my own interpretations to the world, I need to work within the things that are 100% inarguably confirmed. These two rules of altered content, that I cannot entirely invent new stuff, only elaborate on existing ideas, and that I cannot contradict confirmed canon, define all of my Monster Hunter documentaries. Master Rank and G Rank are two interchangeable names. Gotcha, now the G is an additional stamp on the guild cards of Master Hunters. Dundorma is one of many large hunting cities with a leader that is exceptionally respected far and wide. Okay, what if that city functions as a sort of pseudo-capital for the main guild, since it's very centrally located and has a very famous leader? That'd be pretty cool, and there's nothing in the text that says that isn't possible. This also applies to how I inject real-life biology into the series. Ludroth are never outright called a non-Fisherian species in the lore, because that biological concept probably doesn't exist in the Monster Hunter world, but they do fulfill the criteria for it. They are, in canon, confirmed to have an unequal distribution of males to females. So, when I'm making the documentary and when I try to inform people of certain cool biological information, I can add the idea that it is a non-Fisherian species, because it is. The lore just doesn't says it is. Or, the fact that Mizutsune and Almudron evolved to have similar hands with similar functions is never specifically pointed out, but the canon family tree shows they're related, their hands look similar, and the description of their abilities related to their hands are also extremely similar, and so that connection is pretty easy to make, even if the connection itself is never vocalized within the lore. There are, of course, videos that naturally need a little bit more speculation. The map video, for example, relies heavily on assumptions and extrapolation, since the last time we got a canon map was 2009, and so many of the games are not represented on that map at all. And the more narrative episodes, such as the Legends series with the recent Crimson Diablos episode, are obviously more reliant on things that I invent because they are essentially, and very obviously, non-disruptive fanfiction. But overall, this is how I approach canonicity in these videos. If I had to give a percentage as to how accurate my videos are, I'd say that they are about 90% accurate and canon to the Monster Hunter lore. The vast majority of what I say is directly from authoritative sources, and it's only the small gaps in between that I fill myself with the methods I have so far illustrated. In my newer videos, I now even have a notes section in the pinned comment where I explain my reason and my decision making, so check those out whenever you're unsure or just interested. I do genuinely try to write up a little tiny essay on why I did certain things and why I shuffled certain things around. But okay, enough excuses. Let's talk about what you're here for. The times I messed up. I am, and I cannot repeat this enough, just a guy, so I fuck up sometimes. Being able to find, translate, and confirm Monster Hunter lore isn't an ability I had from day one. It is something that I've had to get into, and I do genuinely learn something new about this wonderful franchise almost every day. That, however, means that as I learn more, I realize that some of the things I've said in past videos are just wrong. It's a mix between me only finding untrustworthy sources, me misunderstanding something, and, the most embarrassing one, me just assuming I know something and not bothering to double check it. This can be small stuff, like accidentally calling Basilgeuse a sauropod despite it not being in the script, because I had watched some dinosaur videos beforehand, you know how it is. Or it can be extremely silly, big mistakes, such as basing the ship navigation in the Fatalis episode on a fan-made world map I only later realized was entirely made up with no regard to the canon one. Oof. These are 100% on me, no excuses, and whenever I catch them or some helpful fellow in the comments points them out, I correct them next time I have the chance. So, for example, in the Hoarfrost Reach episode, I call Boa Boa a type of feline, because for some reason I had it in my head that Linians and felines are the same thing. I got comments pointing this mistake out, and once I got around to making my compilation release for the World Documentaries, the voice line was fixed. My eventual Rise compilation release will naturally also include corrections like these. For example, the part where I call Mesoporta a distant land, despite it just literally being right outside of Dundorma, probably, according to lore, so... yeah, it's a learning process. I do make dumb mistakes sometimes that I am committed to fixing whenever possible. But what if 90% accuracy is just not enough for you? What if you just want the hard facts, no fluff? Well, my channel currently does not offer that, but I can direct you to two people who can, both of whom are mostly active on Twitter, and both of whom you might recognize as they have popped up in my video credits occasionally. The first one is Bandlagaicrus, a veteran Loremaster who has been active for so long now that he actually plans to retire once Monster Hunter 6 comes out. But even so, his page is a treasure trove of lore and ecology that is not just straight from the games and books with no fluff, but also translated directly and reliably sourced, as Band has a long history with the franchise. His threads on specific monster ecologies are especially great, definitely check them out. The second account I would recommend is Lutyrannus, who is quickly making a name for himself as a go-to lore source for all things old-school Monster Hunter. Working with original Japanese game text as well as digging up and looking into fairly obscure topics, he has done great work at uncovering Monster Hunter knowledge that had genuinely seemed lost to time before. His threads on translation and especially on subspecies have, no exaggeration, changed the way I approach these videos and also majorly inspired this video that you're watching right now. Both of these are excellent sources for Monster Hunter lore, and both of them are linked in the description below, so if you are at all unsatisfied with the amount of accurate information in my videos, definitely give them a look. Making Monster Hunter content has been and is a pleasure, and I am beyond happy that I get to contribute to this amazing series and world. I am also incredibly grateful that the community has generally welcomed me so openly, and I hope this video helps clear the air on some of the uncertainties regarding my nature content. My documentaries are meant to be a marriage of accurate lore info and an engaging immersive docu style, and in pursuit of that style, some things do get shuffled around and be taken liberties with. Nevertheless, I do hope you continue to enjoy them, or at the very least continue to enjoy Monster Hunter lore through sources other than me. No hard feelings. Thank you all so much for watching, and as usual, a very special thank you to our patrons, which include Fictionape, Cini, Anthony the Hedgehog, Arcturian711, Claire Miboon, Danilo Villavicencio, Drexian, Geo, Jameson Tate, Malcote02, Mr. Pyramid, Mr. Meander, Pidefuego, Peroscoco, Person212, Project Iceman, Russell, Vulgar Beast, Oakwood Tree, Iron Camel, and Courage. Take care everyone, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.